But now to that ABC News exclusive and that extraordinary footage inside the plane crash.
There has been a freakish, fatal accident involving a Learjet flying across the country with no one in control.
Reuters reports that a plane carrying more than 90 passengers crashed in the northeastern Chinese city of Yichun.
Malaysia's Prime Minister announced today that Flight 370 went down in the Indian Ocean and all 239 people on board are dead.
On average, there are about 53 plane crashes every year. These can be attributed to pilot error, other human error, weather, sabotage, and mechanical failure. Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell says that the place where a pilot is born affects how likely they are to crash a plane, just as much as how well they are trained. By the end of this episode, you will be able to decide for yourself. Is ethnicity the main factor that affects the likelihood of a plane crash, or is it just one of the small details that add up to create a larger problem?
In films, plane crashes are the result of unrealistic catastrophe. You should take into account the fact that plane crashes are not caused by one error, made by one person. They are caused by many smaller, less important errors. On their own, these errors do not cause any problem, but when they are grouped together, they lead to disaster. Normally, if a crew member misreads an instrument, there isn't much damage that comes from it. They would recognize their mistake and relay the correct information. However, if they're already tired and under the pressure of flying a plane in bad weather, they might not get a chance to double-check their instrument. And if everyone in the cockpit makes an error like this on their own instruments, they are flying on incorrect information. All the little mistakes add up.
Being under stress, flying in bad weather, or flying into an unfamiliar airport are small details that can fluster the pilot. A human error analysis of commercial aviation accidents using the Human Factors Analysis and Classification System, HFACS, analyze the human causes of plane crashes. The analysis studies errors at all levels of the HVAC system.
It suggests that factors, including unsafe supervision, such as failure to correct problems or supervisory violations, mental limitations, poor research management, lack of personal readiness, decision errors, failure in skill-based perceptual errors, or violations of procedure can all contribute to an aviation accident.
Gladwell presents data that in 52% of plane crashes, the pilots have been awake for 12-plus hours, resulting in fatigue and slower cognitive response. In 44% of crashes, the pilots have never flown together, resulting in an unfamiliarity between the pilots. According to Gladwell, the average aviation accident is the result of 7 errors.
The culture in a place where someone is born affects the way that they communicate. If they are from a more conservative culture, like many of the countries in the Middle East and Southern Asia, they are most likely going to use a way of communication that has more mitigation. But if they are born in a more outgoing nation, such as the United States, they're going to be more likely to communicate in a more upfront way, in a way that has less mitigation. In countries where the communication is more ambiguous, accidents are more frequent. It is a common example of a lower employee, such as a crew member, fearing that they might disrespect their pilot.
PDI, or Power Distance Index, is a measurement of how a person's culture affects their communication between a superior and a subordinate. Countries can be categorized based on their PDI. Countries with a low power distance, like the United States, tend to have subordinates seeing themselves as equals to their superiors, while countries with high power distance, like South Korea and Colombia, tend to have subordinates that see themselves as inferior to their superiors.
Prior to 2000, Korean air loss rate was 17 times higher than that of United Airlines. From January of 1990 to December of 1999, there were 8 aviation incidents involving Korean Air. One well-known Korean air flight was on August 6, 1992. Flight 801 took off from Seoul, South Korea, headed toward Agana, Guam, at 10:30 p.m. on a rainy August 5th. At around 1:30 a.m., the pilot decided to make a visual landing. The pilot, the flight engineer, and the first officer were unable to see the runway due to weather conditions. They decided to make a missed approach, meaning they attempted to circle around and land again. However, they were in slow pulling up from descent and crashed into Nimitz Hill, 3 miles southwest of the airport. 228 of the 254 passengers aboard the flight were killed. Today, Korean Air is one of the safest airlines in the world. Since 2000, the number of airline incidents has decreased by half. What has caused this decrease in aviation accidents?
The problem was only solved when the leadership of Korean Air accepted that the reason for the crashes was due to their culture of communication, which they fixed by bringing in David Greenberg from Delta Airlines, who ran their flight operations. Among other things, he had all the pilots speak English, because that was the language of air flight. He did not fire the pilots and start from scratch. He just changed how they operated.
The most common cause of plane crashes is pilot error. However, this is understandable. The pilot is the one person on the aircraft that has the most things to do. The crew must be able to communicate with the pilot in an effective way, especially when the pilot needs to change the course of the aircraft. According to linguists Ute Fisher and Judith Arasanu, there are 6 distinct ways to convince the pilot to change course, each with differing levels of mitigation or reduction in severity.
The first and most severe is the command. This form of communication is the most direct and to the point. There is no mitigation.
Bear 45 degrees right.
And following that is the crew obligation statement. We is used to make the statement appear to be more general and less specific to one person.
We should bear right soon.
The crew suggestion makes the statement seem like it is talking about the whole crew and that they are all performing the action together.
Let's turn right.
The query asks a question, indicating that the speaker is admitting that they are not in charge.
What direction would you like to turn?
The preference indicates that it is up to the pilot to decide the best course of action by providing them with 2 choices.
You can turn right or left.
The last form of communication, the hint, is the most mitigated of all. The crew would say a passing comment to get the pilot to react, but it isn't an effective way of getting the pilot to change direction.
The turn ahead looks easier than our current path.
Flight crews that lack the ability to successfully perform clear communication between the pilot and the other crew members are more likely to be involved in aviation incidents. The combination of the ability of an airline to communicate, resolve errors and unintentional mechanical errors, and maintain the health and mental stability of its crew determines its ability to have successful flights. Without close attention to these factors, crashes like these will continue to occur.